This is my kitchen. My name is Melissa. I'm a DIYer and I have been working on this space for the past couple years off and on. Today I'm so excited to share with you that it is finally finished. This kitchen overhaul started last year when I built my island in the center. I made 6 cabinet boxes, skinny ones to go on the back side and 24-inch wide ones to go on the front that were all custom built from scratch. This was probably the hardest thing I've ever built. And I challenged myself by using hardwoods like red oak, doing a custom stain that looked good with my floors and matched paneling that was from a company I was going to use, like their pre-made panels. It was really tough. I utilized every square inch of space that I possibly had in this kitchen, allowing for 36 inches or more around the whole island for walk space. This project, as well as most of the ones you see in this video, have breakouts to go further in detail. So if you want to build an island like this, just click in the cards and you can find the video in which I talk about it. One of my major goals for this island was to get things off my countertop. So I planned for a built-in microwave drawer, which is kind of a newer way to have your microwave. It's very cool. And I also planned out custom drawer and cabinet sizes for specifically like my appliances, or like the height of a cereal box or the height of stacked cans. I really thought through how I wanted to organize my new kitchen. So everything with this kitchen island I designed and built myself, but I did have a little help from the electrician, as you saw when I was doing the microwave install earlier, and then the counter as well. We hired out a countertop fabricator to cut quartz for me. This was my first time ever having stone counters in my kitchen, so that was like life-changing. As soon as I got quartz on the island, I knew I really wanted quartz in the rest of the kitchen. All of the paneling that was the actual like oak finish on my island was from new cabinets, and this is like a laminated kind of panel that's really easy to clean, and it like comes prefabricated. So I just did all of this trim work and my face frames stained to match. Now my kitchen got a massive upgrade with this super functional large island in the center. I spent an entire year enjoying this thing and dreaming of making the rest of the kitchen up to its quality level. The island truly transformed how we used our kitchen and how well organized and functional it was. So I just wanted to do that in the entire space. There were also design things that I did not like about my kitchen, such as the knotty pine ceiling. It's just never been my style. It's too rustic. So this spring I decided I'm going to move forward and upgrade the rest of the kitchen. I began by changing out our fridge. Our previous fridge was very standard, but it was starting to freeze some of the food in the back. So I got a new fridge, which I found one that was 30 inches wide, but counter depth, which gave me an extra 4 inches of walk space between the island and the fridge. It's just awesome to gain that back. So I modified the fridge cabinet above and moved the shelf higher to accommodate the height of the new fridge. The bulkhead above the fridge and all the cabinets has always bothered me. It really makes the kitchen feel short. These 8-foot ceilings with the bulkhead above, it just like is distracting and busy when you're looking at the space. And I felt like it would be a big upgrade to remove that whole bulkhead and bring all of my cabinetry up to the ceiling height. Speaking of the ceiling, I did find someone who wanted to repurpose this knotty pine. So I took down all these boards very carefully and I sold it on Facebook Marketplace for someone to repurpose in their cabin, which is a much more fitting place for this raw blue pine. Once I was into it, demolition kind of spiraled out of control. I decided I was going to drywall the whole space, so I began to remove the wall paneling as well, and I uncovered all of this old paneling from the 80s, covered in wallpaper and such, so I just removed every layer that I could till I was down to the plaster and lath. In one spot, I even began to remove the plaster and lath because I had a heat vent in the floor there that was partially covered because of the thickness of the wall. So gaining back an inch from removing that plaster and lath and then hanging half-inch thick drywall was really going to help me out uncovering that floor vent. The ceiling was such a labor of love. It had all these furring strips I had to pry out by hand, And then I also had to add in some supports, like some joist supports, because I can't pull this ceiling up to the original 9 feet height. I need space for my electrical. We have plumbing for an upstairs bathroom running through here, and we have these LVL beams from a big wall that we took out when we did our initial remodel in 2019. So I added all these supports for my drywall to get hung, and then I also cut out a big feature above the island in the one spot where there was nothing obstructing me from bringing the ceiling to that higher height. I have such a cool design feature that I dreamt up for above the island. This is what the space looked like as the ceiling was ready to go and framed out, and my guy I hired for drywall started already on the walls. I did decide to hire out drywall because I've done it many times and I'm getting better, but I'm no professional. This is a job where I'm so glad that I did hire it out because they have the lift, and this guy was working with 12-foot long sheets solo. I could never do that. His taping and mudding also only took him 2 days for the whole kitchen space, which is wild. So after I primed all the raw drywall, when the drywaller was finished, I'm gonna get started on my ceiling feature above the island. I put some supports in there because I need something to screw my creation into. I had this idea to make a wood feature, but it's going to be more sleek and modern with some angles. I again wanted to challenge myself, and I figured out how to use plywood and make it look really high end. I combined 2 pieces of plywood together at a beveled edge so that the seam was inconspicuous and I could get a piece long enough to span the 10-foot opening. This plywood has to angle up to meet a 4x8 sheet of plywood on the ceiling. And so I needed to cut a 10-foot long bevel at 60 degrees in order to get it to slant at the correct angle. This proved to be so difficult, but I did figure it out. I added a spacer onto the plate of my circular saw to cut an angle bigger than 45 degrees. The other side, of course, is the opposite angle at 30 degrees. So this is now going to intersect a 90-degree right angle and mount perfectly onto my ceiling design. Once everything was ready for install on the ceiling, I did most of my finish work before getting it put up there, just because it's a little easier on the ground. I did a paint wash, which brought this kind of brown, a little bit more subdued finish to the wood that I found so beautiful once it was fully sealed in poly. When it came time to install my idea, I truly was thinking to myself, is this really gonna just look like plywood when I'm finished? Is it gonna look like I just screwed a piece of plywood on the ceiling? But thankfully, I've heard nothing but amazement and compliments from everyone who's been in my house to see this ceiling. I can just nail the sides in because those angles I cut make it so that they're flush with the sheet of plywood on the ceiling and flush against the framing on the bottom. The 2 longer sides I just mounted as is, and then that left me with compound mitered angles for the 2 shorter sides, which were quite tricky to figure out. But I got them. And now all that was left was to cut some angled trim. Since this is not a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle, which is all they make in the store, I had to cut custom trim at 30-degree angles so that this would finish out the bottom of my tray ceiling design. I repurposed some of the furring strips I had ripped off the ceiling to make this trim, and so they needed a lot of love in order to look pretty. Furring strips are never very nice wood. Since I was painting them anyway, I knew that I could make it work with some lightweight spackling, a lot of sanding, primer, etc. Before I could put the trim on, I caulked all my seams with a color matched caulking. I sealed everything in several layers of polyacrylic to give it a satin luster. All the angles that I had to cut to make this plywood fit together just so, and the trim work align, made me really proud of myself. I feel like it just kind of shows off how much my carpentry has improved over the years. So now the lights are going in, these beautiful golden globe fixtures. This is how the ceiling ended up, and it's beautiful, but wait till you see it with the rest of the design I have in mind. Next up, we're going to remove my wall of cabinets. Yes, I did the ceiling fully finished before working on anything else. I needed my kitchen to be functional for our family of 6, and we needed to cook in here regularly for the majority of the year, so that's why I did this kitchen in phases. I started with the ceiling because, of course, anything you're doing overhead is going to fall down and affect everything below it. But at this point then, I had the island fully functional and nice. I had my ceiling and most of my drywall done, so only the main L of the kitchen was under construction, and I was able to make it work. So when it was time to remove the backsplash, this like subway tile standard white backsplash we had, some of it was simple, like this piece where it was just like a sticky sheet on the plywood next to the fridge. But then the rest of it was really hard and I needed help. I called in my neighbor who I sometimes hire to help me with jobs. His name is John. He was the muscle in this situation. As we tore into the backsplash, we removed the counter. This counter I actually fabricated myself out of solid surface like 7 years ago. It's held up beautifully, but like I mentioned earlier, I really, really want quartz and I needed help demolishing the cabinets because most of the lower cabinets are ones that are built in place in the 70s. So they're not like pre-made cabinets today where they're all kind of boxes that fit next to each other. These ones needed to be broken apart to be removed. In order to keep my sink functional, I jerry-rigged this situation that you see to the left. And because of that, I had to build my framing for my new cabinets in place piece by piece, as you see here. That way we could have a functional sink in the space and a functional dishwasher as renovations continued. So this 2x4 framing is going to serve as support for my lower cabinets since my walls are kind of wonky in this old house. And I'm going to be assembling IKEA with the help of my friend Kate here, because if you've ever assembled IKEA cabinets, you know it is a daunting and tedious task, so it's much funner with a friend. The corner cabinet was huge and bulky, but I have a plan to put a Lazy Susan in here I think is going to be really functional versus before I had a blind cabinet in the corner that I really did not utilize to its full potential. Building and leveling the 2x4 base for these cabinets to sit on made it so that the cabinets were all level once I set them on top, and it just simplified things so much versus leveling these cabinets individually. So I did screw my 2x4 framing down into the subfloor, and then I'm screwing the cabinets themselves into the 2x4 framing. In one spot, I had a heat vent that I needed to pull forward underneath the toe kick of the cabinet, and I built kind of a custom solution. Maybe not the best solution. I just used what I had on hand, but so far it's been amazing. I did this about 6 months ago now because this has been a long renovation, and I don't hear the tinfoil crinkle, but the tinfoil does prevent heat loss into the wood around it. I went with IKEA cabinetry just because I knew it was really DIY friendly. I could have a lot of control over ordering, and I just thought it was customizable enough for me. The doors I went with are the black anthracite. So then I did have to place some drywall where the new backsplash is going to go. The old backsplash like took the OSB board behind it with it because of the mortar bed. So I'm just marking with paint the corners of my outlet I need to cut out. And this is a little trick I use a lot when doing precision cutting because I don't have a rotozip. So I'm pressing my drywall against it. And then this shows me exactly where I need to cut out with my oscillating multi-tool to get a hole for my outlet. Ideally, I would have drywalled this whole wall, like removed all the plaster and drywall new over the lath. I kind of wish I had done that, but this is just the simplest. All the ugly walls will be covered by cabinets anyway. So speaking of cabinets, Kate came back to help me again assemble all of the uppers. I got 40-inch uppers and they are a massive amount of storage. It's going to be such an upgrade. On the top of the wall, I was able to use the Secton rail system that IKEA comes with. I couldn't do it on the bottom of the wall because it just like wasn't a solid place to screw into. It's hard to even describe unless you were there looking at it, but that's why I built up that base. So Steven and I then used all of our muscles to get this up onto the wall. That corner cabinet was rough and I was drenched in sweat lifting this high, but then the rest went so easy. It's a remarkable thing how they just pop up onto that metal rail in like a French cleat kind of system. And I was very impressed by how sturdy they were once they were installed. Some of the cabinets on the bottom I had to build custom, like my sink cabinet I built in place because it was like 35 inches instead of 36 in order to shimmy over a full-size dishwasher and then this 12-inch cabinet next to my stove. I also built a custom cabinet for the end because I wanted a garbage pullout that utilized the space that would usually be lost to a toe kick. I knew I wouldn't be standing in this corner and needing space for a toe kick to work, so I figured I might as well build my own cabinet so I could drop my pullout down 4 inches and then have space for an additional drawer above the garbage pullout. So glad I did this, and I repurposed that piece of plywood that used to be by the fridge. I repurposed like as much material as I could out of the original kitchen because I hate to throw things away. When the time approached for my counters to come, I had ordered quartz to match my island, but I noticed that these rails that are connecting the front of IKEA suction cabinets stick up higher than the sides, so I actually chiseled out for each of these to drop down and be flush so that my quartz counter sits atop the 3/4 inch sides of the cabinet instead of like this metal rail interfering with them. I rehired the same company I had used a year prior for my island to do the quartz in the rest of the space, and it turned out fantastic. I was absolutely giddy. I actually have a funny story about these counters that I will leave in a comment below this video if you want to read about it. It was very serendipitous and saved me thousands. At this point, I was so relieved to have a functional kitchen. Getting counters in made all the difference. So the next things to work on were like painting the insides of all of the raw plywood from the cabinets that I built myself from scratch. This under the sink plumbing, I did hire a plumber to do. I've done plumbing plenty and I could have done it myself, but honestly, the guy, he quoted me a really good price that it was just not worth my time to spend a few hours figuring it out. Somewhere along the way, I had ordered a new door for the basement opening. It had been a sliding barn door, and again, not really my style, and switching it to a regular door gave the basement a little more privacy when we have guests stay down there, but it also, again, gained me 2 inches of walking space in this hallway kind of between like where people are sitting at the island and walking to the back door that you see in this clip. So next, I'm gonna build a feature hood vent cover for above my range. I decided to build a couple rectangles that I'm going to screw up into like my cabinets and the wall studs behind here so that it can support whatever material I'm going to cover my vent with. And originally I was planning to make the hood vent the same height as the cabinets next to it. So the bottoms all lined up and it was this one streamlined look. But when I was done, I decided, number one, it looks a little too bulky and weird because my cabinets are so tall. If my cabinets were shorter and mounted higher on the ceiling, they would be less functional, but having a hood vent line up with them would have made more sense. The way I did it here, my cabinets are about 20 inches off the top of the counter, which is a more normal height for use, but inevitably I do need to move my hood vent higher because I found out there's like clearances, especially of our gas range where there's open flame, and 20 inches is simply not enough. So after I finished this beautiful hood vent with this fluted design, I had to take it all apart. I had to undo all my work. That was super disappointing, but it's kind of good because I stupidly used duct tape on the venting for this and I should have used HVAC tape. So I was able to fix that mistake as well a little later in this video. So when the first iteration of my hood vent cover was finished, I had to mull over whether or not I had to take it apart because I was kind of resistant, obviously, and I moved on to trim. There was so much trim that I needed to prime and prep, and a new panel for the left side of the fridge and all of this stuff like toe kick, etc. So I primed it all and then I came in with 2 coats of black paint. I got this paint color matched to the finish on my IKEA cabinet panels. I didn't buy all the special trim pieces that IKEA makes that match perfectly just because I knew I could save a lot of money doing it this way. And I didn't buy the panels for the side of my cabinets either. I had measured my cabinets so they abut right next to the window. Like truly there's like a 1/4 inch of space there. That meant I was just going to prime and paint the sides of my IKEA cabinets without adding a panel. In order to get paint to stick to IKEA, you have to make sure you use a shellac primer and then it works just fine. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to build for this kitchen remodel is a cabinet for above my fridge. The fridge has all of this space above it that can be utilized. Some of it was from before, but also some of it was from the bulkhead I removed. It needs its own little cabinet. Now, granted, this space is not super accessible unless you have a stool, so I'm only going to put seasonal things in here like camping equipment. I also installed a new panel to the left of the fridge so that this all looks encased and custom built. I did do some trim work, and on these pieces I did like a beveled edge where it meets up and looks seamless. Another addition is electrical. My electrician came and wired me down a outlet for this spot in this panel. This is amazing because this corner never had electricity before and it makes more of my counter powered up and more functional. I added some thin, nice paneling to the other side to get it to match up with the depth of the paneling that was existing. And then I did like filler and caulking and a lot of work to make it all look seamless and intentional. Now we're going to move on to crown and trim work. So I had the idea for the crown above my cabinets to put like blocking behind, and I'm just quickly nailing this into my cabinets. This piece of wood is offset so that my piece of crown is going to be completely flush with the front of my cabinets when the doors are closed. So this piece that I'm nailing in is completely flush with my cabinet box. This is definitely not the typical way to do crown, but I came up with this idea because I really want a modern, flush and streamlined look. I did have to scribe a bunch of pieces of my trim so that it aligned with the ceiling close enough I could just caulk that as well. I've gotten in the habit of nailing my mitered corners together so that's a nice tight seam before installing them, and it's made my trim look a lot more professional. Then I just nail this crown right into the blocking that I added. I also installed my toe kick trim that I pre-painted, including the one that has a cutout for my heat vent under the cabinet, and I trimmed out all of my windows. It was amazing to get the windows done because it really made the space feel a lot more finished off. Some of my window trim I had to cut really custom on my table saw so that it actually wrapped around the window, since, you know, I brought my cabinets really close. Well, there's not enough space there to put like a real piece of trim, so I cut this like L shape, and it was a clever solution. Trimming out everything took more than a week. I think I did it off and on for like 3 weeks. There were so many pieces of trim. Almost every single one needed to be custom cut because of the wonky walls and how tight I wanted things to fit together. There were a lot of funky angles like this you can see here where my cabinet turned at a 45. After everything got installed, every nail hole was filled with lightweight spackling, sanded perfectly flush smooth. Then every crevice was caulked and smoothed out. Then everything was painted. So I started painting all of the white trim in the whole space. Then I painted all of the walls and the ceiling too, a creamy off-white color like an ivory. And then I came in and hand painted all of the black trim work. So it was a lot of work. After all that trim was done, I did land on the decision to redo my hood vent, as I mentioned earlier. So I had to take apart my handiwork and I had to move these rectangles I built up to a different height. Now at this point in the renovation, I did have my backsplash tile picked out. So I was really happy that I knew my new measurement was actually just going to be the height of one tile. I'm using a super large format tile, so that is where I determined the height of my new vent. It is now 31 inches off of the stove, which I think is a lot safer and just more appropriate. But since I removed what was there and I'm going to have more exposed wall than originally planned, of course I have to do some plaster removal and add some more drywall back in. And then of course my newly exposed sides of the cabinets needed priming and painting as well. Now I reinstalled my vent piping with the correct type of tape, and when it came time to replace the fluted paneling that was covering it, my Instagram audience actually convinced me to go a different direction. I had another paneling that matched my kitchen island. It's like that white oak finish that I cut to size, and I'm going to use this to cover the hood vent instead. It kind of speaks to the wood finish on the island and pulls the kitchen design together a little bit more. The only problem was that I didn't like the dark veining on this, so I decided to come in and paint it with acrylic paint and then seal that up. I'm pretty artistic if you haven't noticed, so I just color matched the paint so that it blended in perfectly. Next, it was time for doors. That was a little tricky to figure out how to install on my custom built cabinets because they're IKEA doors and they have hinges that are supposed to go in specific holes and such, but I did get it figured out. And then I installed all my handles. I used this handy hardware jig to get them all placed appropriately. I chose to do my handles horizontal along the bottom and oversized. It's a super modern look. I love it, but it's maybe not for everybody. You should let me know in the comments below if you like that or not. And now it was time to move on to my backsplash backsplash. So for a long time, I lived with the kitchen just drywall, raw drywall. I was so ready to cover it in something wipeable and durable like tile. I got this super large format tile off of a contractor on Marketplace for $100 per tile. And it's a total steal if you've ever purchased tile that's really big, because when you order tile this large, you always have to pay for freight shipping, and that costs $500+. So I saved a ton by driving 3 hours to go pick this up. The tiles are like 63 inches by 31 inches, and I measured out everything I needed for my template. Like, I did this all by hand with a ton of planning. I measured like 6 or 7 times because I really wanted to make sure that I didn't get any cut wrong. I didn't have a replacement tile if something went awry. And then after marking everything with Sharpie, I cut them with an angle grinder and a diamond crusted blade. This was very nerve-wracking. I have almost no experience tiling and certainly no experience with an angle grinder this way. So I just learned from a few videos on YouTube, and I had courage and I went for it. Once all of my pieces were cut and I got my veining to match up as nicely as I could, all that was left were the outlets, which were definitely the most precise and difficult cutting that I've probably ever done. I was scared out of my mind that these brittle tiles would suddenly crack, but miraculously I was able to do all of these cuts without a mess up. I have a whole video breaking out not only the tips I learned for cutting large format porcelain tile, but another video as well doing the backsplash from start to finish. So if you really want to know all the details, then click on those cards. To prep the drywall for install, I did fill my seams with mud and tape, and then I actually waterproofed it just because I already had a bunch of this like Red Guard type waterproofing membrane left over from another project, so it was free. I figured, why not? After 2 coats of the waterproofing membrane, I came in and started to spread my mortar bed. A lot of people on my previous video about doing this tile said that my mortar was mixed too thick, but of course I followed the exact instructions on my bag, and so I'm going to listen to what the product itself tells me to do instead of someone on the internet. This is a special mortar that is like fortified with polymers so that it's meant for large format tile, and I'm spreading it with a large notch trowel so that my ridges are really tall. I'm also back buttering my tiles so that there's mortar on both sides that can hopefully mush together and suction the tile to the wall. As we approach the end of this video, and hopefully you've been impressed with all the work I've done in this kitchen, you get to see the end result soon. I want to invite you to become a member. If you join Welcome to the Woods' channel and financially support my DIY projects, you will get certain perks like early releases for the videos, members only polls, and communication with me, and I will really appreciate it. Every member helps me immensely in feeling supported by my community, as well as doing bigger and better DIY projects. So the trickiest thing about large format tile is getting each tile leveled. I bought these little screw down levelers that go between your seams and they force it flush. So they'll make each tile butt up next to each other in a way that if you glide your hand across it, you won't feel any ridges. For the outlets, I cut my outlet opening small so that the metal wings on the outlet actually went against the tile and held it sturdy. So all I had to do was align it and then use a longer screw to secure my outlets. I was really proud of how this turned out. I did my best to line up all of the veining so that my seams were as inconspicuous as possible. So I came in with caulking on the seams because it's paintable. I used like an acrylic caulk, and I overfilled my seams so that when it dried, I could cut it off flush and then paint it to match the coloring on the tile. I color matched to the best of my ability with some acrylic paint, and I filled in those seams so that they just kind of disappeared. Then I sealed it with a spar urethane, and it really helps make this tile backsplash look more convincing, like it's a solid stone slab with this gorgeous natural veining. Where the tile meets the counter though, I did use the full silicone silicone caulk to prevent water penetration. Then came the fun part of filling all my drawers and cabinets and getting things super organized. So I want to show you all of the upgrades I made to the storage in my kitchen in redesigning and redoing the whole space. First, I have this gorgeous spice drawer. It is super nice to have this right next to the stove when I'm cooking. I also have these pull-out pans right above my fridge. I love this spot for pans because it makes it so I don't need to use a stool to access the storage above my fridge area. And here's that beautiful Lazy Susan holding all of my cookware in the corner shelf. It's way more functional than it was in the past. And I have pullouts in all my 24-inch deep cabinets so that I don't have to be reaching back there. This one, with its 3 pullouts, transformed a regular base cabinet into a drawer system, and I just find drawers much more functional than shelves. In keeping with my goal of getting stuff off my counters, my knife block transformed into a drawer insert where I can hold up to like 50 some knives in a drawer. It's awesome and I love it. Right above that is my pull-out cutting boards. There's 2 of them in my island that are very functional. I use one for vegetables and one for fruits. To the right of my stove, I have the coolest pullout that most people have never seen. It's the utensils canister pullout. Again, all these utensils off my counter, but super easy to grab when I'm cooking at the stove. And then below that on the shelves, I have saran wrap and aluminum foil. So opposite that, on the other side of my stove, is the garbage pullout. And that is really accessible for anyone, like without having to come through the kitchen to throw things away. It's on the end where people can access it. And then above that is the spices that I showed off. So I just love how that all got organized. The backside of my island, those doors that look like panels open and they hold pantry items. It has tons of space to spare. Without changing the square footage, this entire kitchen not only functions so much more, stores so much more, is so much better organized, but it literally feels way, way bigger. Let's take a look at the whole design together. Wow, it was months in the making, but the effort was so worth it. I did keep the black cabinets from the original design, but other than that, almost every single inch is different. The biggest difference came with fresh drywall and a new ceiling. It feels lighter, brighter, and cleaner in this space with more minimalist lines. The wood tones on the ceiling accent, as well as the hood vent and the island, they all speak to each other and they bring a warmth to this very contrasting color design. Some may say that this design isn't radically different from what I started with because both are modern type black kitchens, but truly every inch of this kitchen is more luxurious, functional, and durable with higher end finishes, and it's just gorgeous to be in and functional to cook in. I cook a lot and I have 4 growing kids who are always in my kitchen. I really appreciate the upgrades. It has changed our lives to renovate this kitchen. If you have questions about any of the products that I installed or any of the process to DIY this, just drop them below and I'll try and answer as many as I can. I've been asked a lot like how to do this when you're living in your house and especially inconveniencing your family. And my top suggestions would be to do it in phases like I did. I worked on the island and then I had a good island, and then later I worked on the walls and the ceiling, and then those were all finished. And then later I tackled the rest, but I kept all my appliances in place so that we could still function. If possible, that is the way to do it with the least amount of strain. But also I plan to do this over the warm months because I live in Minnesota. So if I was doing this in the winter, it would be much harder. I did it in the summer when I could cook outside on my grill and we could supplement a lot more meals and have more picnics and salads and such. All these things made renovating this kitchen a little less stressful. I would love to know in the comments below, what is your favorite part of the design, or maybe what was your just favorite part of the video? Like which project inspired you the most? Because ultimately my goal here is to show you that if I can do it, you can do it. I am self-taught and I have been DIYing now for like 8 years. I just learn as I go and I'm tenacious and I have the courage to start. That's all it takes. I always say DIY is courage over confidence. And so if you found this kitchen transformation and my page inspiring, then please hit the subscribe button and even the notifications bell. You can keep abreast to all of my projects. Thank you for watching. Welcome to the woods. We'll catch you again next time.